Hi, everyone. I'm Terry Crosby in Care of Relationships. Welcome to Intimate Relationships. What if nobody's wrong? I'm a life and relationship coach, and I often say that I help people who love each other get along. Today, we're talking about sacred listening. That certainly helps with the getting along part. So, what is sacred listening, and what can we say about it that might be helpful on a daily basis? Something that you could incorporate in your, I don't know, listening routine. All right. So, one way to describe sacred listening is that it's listening with the heart. And if it's listening with the heart, what is the heart's language? What is the way of the heart? That would be a good question. And further, how do we do with sacred listening when it comes to hearing our own inner voice or someone else's voice, someone else's communication? I want to read something to you from the Sufi Book of Life. This is what that book looks like. All right. And there's a passage in there that will start us off really well. It says, many courses today teach good listening skills. The relentless draw of Western culture toward outer life and individual goals forces us to admit that we have forgotten how to really take in the concerns of another person. Perhaps this lack has, in part, driven the rise of Western psychology in the last 100 years. Because we can no longer really listen to each other, we train professionals to do it for us. That's interesting. Some research has concluded that whether psychotherapy works for a person depends mainly on whether there is a good relationship between therapist and client. Trust, a feeling of give and take, and focus all seem essential. The Sufis would call this the pathway of Mujib, Mujib, or sacred listening. This quality can develop from strengthening the heart and making it a conscious container for what enters it. The training of the heart also allows one to empty the container, so to speak, so that it can receive more and not hold on to what has been received. I love that part, not hold on. This takes one into what the 20th century Sufi Inayat Khan called the silent life, which he says is nothing other than the original creative silence that began the universe. Touching this type of silence can give one hope, because in touching the mystery of original creation, all things are possible. I just think that's a really good way to get us started here today. And to continue, I have another story about Dan Rather, who you may know, he's a journalist. He was interviewing Mother Teresa one day, and he said, so this is about sacred listening again. So Dan said to Mother Teresa, you say that you pray all the time. What do you say to God? And Mother Teresa replied, I don't say anything. I listen, which kind of threw him off. It took him a minute to sort of recover from that, consider that. And then he said, well, then what does God say to you? And Mother Teresa replied, God doesn't say anything. God listens. And then there was this really long pause, after which Mother Teresa said, and if you can't understand that, I cannot explain it to you. Best answer ever. So I wanted to, before we dive into the what fors and wherefores and what fors, whatever that phrase is, I wanted to tell you one more thing from Nancy Bloomer, who is an Episcopal priest and college professor. She said, the bedrock of listening, and I don't know where this is from, actually, I don't know what publication, but here's her quote. The bedrock of listening and speaking from the heart is inner silence, whether we are praying with God or conversing with a human. It is only when our opinions, really pay attention to this part. It's only when our opinions, our judgment, and our self-centeredness are silenced that we can truly listen to another person. And it is only when our sense of self-importance and our need to perform are silenced that we can truly speak from the heart. I'm just going to read that sentence again. Okay. Or that part. It is only when our opinions, our judgments, and our self-centeredness are silenced can we truly listen to another person. And it is only when our sense of self-importance and our need to perform are silenced that we can truly speak from the heart. Isn't that gorgeous? Inner silence, she continues, inner silence demolishes our fear of appearing foolish in the presence of another, and we find ourselves willing to speak our truth, warts and all. So in my book, so that's the Sufi Book of Life. And in my book, which is this one, How to Save Your Fourth Marriage, I talk about the core skills that it's the third section in the book and the third and final section in the book. And I talk about the 5 core skills for making changes. And those 5 core skills are breathe, receive, observe, reflect, and rehearse. And so the second skill that I talk about in the book, receive, is the one I want to address, add to the conversation today, because it is a skill needed for sacred listening. So the definition I offer in the book for receive is this one: to welcome what is, 3 things, to welcome what is, 3 ways of describing it. To welcome what is, to be present and accept. When it rains, let it rain. So at the core of receiving, this is all of this says, at the core of receiving, there is stillness. At the core of sacred listening, there's also stillness. That's what Mother Teresa said. I don't talk and God doesn't talk. He listens, I listen. God talks, God listens, I listen. And so it means that to really hear someone, to really listen, we must be in a place of that really still place, that place of peace. And there just can't be anything in the way of hearing. That's what it's. So how do we do that? Think about our day, think about all the things we go through in a day and how, I don't know, distracted we are, how busy we are, how caught up in the day we are. So I want to read this part of my book to you because it really describes what the act of receiving looks like, feels like, might help with this discussion, this this conversation we're having. All right. To receive my partner means to know and accept what he does, how he thinks, what he believes, which is no doubt different from what I do, how I think, and what I believe. To really hear him, there is no push from me, no demand for him to be more of something or less of something. You know how we do that in conversation as they're talking? We kind of wish they weren't the way they are, or wish they weren't saying what they're saying, because now, I don't know, it starts this whole thing. There is no push from me, no demand for him to be more of something or less of something. I see him, I pay attention to what inspires him, and take note of what supports him, troubles him, matters to him. To receive him is to appreciate who he is as he is, because I've offered the same kindness and consideration to myself. Key phrase there, because I've offered the same kindness and consideration to myself. Learning to accept myself has prepared me to welcome all of him, all of us as we are. So this goes back to the, if my ego is in the way, if my opinions, my frustration, anything is in the way, then I'm exercising that push against thing rather than actually hearing him. So what if, so this is the key thing here. What if I'm not in a place of peace and I need to have a conversation with someone where sacred listening would be a really good thing? Maybe it's a difficult conversation. Maybe it's a difficult conversation and I really want to hear them, but I already know in advance that it might be not the easiest thing in the world to hear what they have to say. So 3 things. Here's how you practice becoming good at sacred listening. You don't start with the hard stuff. Okay. You start with yourself. You engage in an action that involves just you. Just that's the starting block. You don't stay there, but that's the starting block. And you also start with something easy, nothing that tugs on you in any way. And the third way I would say that, it's a little bit the same, but I also like the word insignificant. Start with something insignificant, something that doesn't matter 1 iota about it. Don't start with the big trouble. That's what this is about. Don't practice trying to receive something. Don't practice sacred listening around something that's plagued you your whole life and remains unresolved. Don't do that. Don't try that. You'll fail and then you'll quit and you won't try anymore. Okay. That's what tends to happen. So let me get specific. What it means to receive an easy situation is that you notice your ability to pay attention to an ordinary moment. That's where you start. See, that's not hard. It may be something that you and I don't do enough of, but it's not hard. And we can remind ourselves that we know how to do this. So the idea here is that when the act of receiving is a casual daily practice, that it prepares you to welcome tougher circumstances when they arrive. It's a little bit like practicing meditation. And the more you do that, the more it gives your day a calmness. It's easier to stay calm. It's easier to get calm. If you did get upset, meditation can really help. So here, I'm going to give you some examples, and I want you to, take a moment to really appreciate the simplicity of these situations and how they invite your senses to inform you. Okay, first one. Stroll through a garden on a spring morning as the light comes up. Notice the new life popping up everywhere, what's blooming, what's pushing up through the surface of the soil. Listen as you walk. What do you hear? Try putting all your attention in your feet. And if you can be barefoot, that's even better. But put all your attention in your feet. And what do you notice? What's happening there? Sense the temperature of the air on your skin. That's an example of a simple, totally simple situation where there's nothing difficult about it. But what it does is it gives you a chance to practice appreciating the simplicity of an ordinary moment, all the qualities about it. It has you paying attention. So that's where you start. That's the kind of practice you want when you're helping yourself learn sacred listening. You're practicing, you're working your way up to sacred listening. All right, here's one more simple example. Stand at your kitchen sink, let the warm water pour through your hands. Is there sun on your face? What is the sky like when you look out your kitchen window? What do you hear? And as you wash your hands, what does the soap smell like? What does the fresh towel feel like? How are you breathing? Can you feel your whole body? Things like that. Okay, so those are examples of nothing to it situations. And that's how you start practicing for sacred listening. All right. Those first examples are the easiest ones because they don't involve other people. So if you want to step up your receiving practice and your sacred listening practice, what you do is you add a human to the mix, but still you keep it easy. So it might be like, be at lunch with a friend you love as if you've never met them before. Key part, as if you've never met them before. Be fresh, be open, what's there, how do they sound? Listen as if you've never heard them before. Notice their posture, notice their movements. You're not judging, you're just noticing. That's a big difference. Just how are they? What are they doing? How do they sound? Where are their feet? Their posture, their movements, their feet. Is their head tilted? How do they breathe? How do they use their fork? Just stuff that doesn't matter, stuff that doesn't matter. And what's the pace of the conversation? Is it fast? Is it funny? Is it slow? Is it contemplative? What is it? Okay. So after you practice in small and unimportant situations, then you're ready for those with a little bit more emotional baggage or history or reactivity. Do you see where we're going here? We're just going to start easy and we're going to ramp it up a little bit. So the easiest way to engage with a situation that's it's got a person in it and it's maybe got some tension is to watch someone else do it. Don't even do it yourself first. So an example might be you go hear a lecture, a speech, you go do something out in public and you watch somebody else give a talk, and then maybe there's a question and answer thing at the end, and you watch how they deal with a difficult audience member who's asking kind of a pushy question. You watch what happens in your body as they're dealing with it. Do you understand? It's an easy way. It's one step removed. It's a step back so that you can really observe yourself. You're not the one talking. Gives you a great way to notice where you get afraid or triggered or resistance. You could go on YouTube also and do the same thing. Find a little controversial thing and an interaction between two people and see what happens in you. All right. So this will prepare you for a situation that's more personal. So in a situation, so the next step is more personal and get more personal. So the most important thing to remember in your more personal situations is to throw a flag on your own play. I'm going to explain that. So you start with a situation that's just you and someone else. Preferably, it's not out in public. Okay, it's a private situation. And so give yourself the benefit of privacy and practice with somebody you trust, somebody who's going to make it easy on you to observe yourself, and somebody who's going to help you and encourage you. And the important thing here is that you set yourself up for the conversation. You agree that when you get upset or triggered, you're going to call one on yourself. And you're going to stop on a dime. And so the agreement is that you'll call a halt to the reaction you have if you have one. It's your job, not anybody else's. So tell your partner that you intend to pay attention to reactions that send you away from kindness, respect, or love. You might say something like, I just noticed I had a really strong reaction. Let me take a moment to see what it is. So then you unpack it a little. What is it made of? What are the steps? How did it happen? What got to me? That kind of thing. And so at first, don't worry about fixing any of your reactions. Don't do that. Just get used to noticing them and stating them and sort of calling yourself out on them. That's why it's important to be with somebody who's kind. All right. So yes, all of this takes practice. And you should know that hardly anybody, it might comfort you to know that hardly anybody is good at this to start with. No, it's something that it takes practice. So I'm going to tell you one last story about how I got started with all of this. What inspired me to take on sacred listening in my marriage, which truly changed my marriage. my fourth marriage, the one I saved, in case you don't know my story. All right. So this is about Dr. Hugh Lin, and around 1980 at the Hawaii State Hospital, he was assigned to a special ward for the criminally insane. And so we're talking murderers and rapists, and it was awful. And it was not a safe place to work. Patients attacked staff almost every day. So Dr. Hugh Lin was a practitioner of something called Ho'oponopono, which is a Hawaiian approach to the development of community. And it involves accepting communal responsibility for individual issues that arise. So one person's issue becomes the community's issue. And then they find a resolution by engaging the community and asking the elders for help and that kind of thing. And the 4 steps of this approach, this is important, it's called repentance, I'm sorry, forgiveness, please forgive me, gratitude, thank you, and love, I love you. So the belief is that when individual minds heal, then the worldly problem in question heals too. It's a little bit like prayer. It has kind of it might seem a far out idea at first. It kind of did for me, but the more I read about it, the more I realized that it's a little bit like holding a situation or a person in prayer. It's the power of that. So here's what he did. Instead of looking for what was wrong with the patients, Dr. Len pored over one patient file after another. It took a long time. It was a slow process, and he read the details of their crimes. And can you imagine? Oof. He read the details of their crimes, and he made peace within himself about what each person had done. He didn't judge the patients or look for ways to correct them. He didn't try to rehabilitate them. In fact, he consciously expressed gratitude for the opportunity they provided for him to examine himself. I had never heard of anything like that before. Here's the kicker. Here's the really amazing part. He never personally attended to any patient. He didn't go visit them. He didn't go see them. He didn't talk to them. And still, positive changes occurred. Some patients were taken off their medications. Others stopped fighting. Harmony between patients and staff improved remarkably. And one by one, patients were declared well enough to leave the treatment facility. And in fact, at the end of 4 years, the hospital closed due to lack of business. Only 2 patients remained, and they were transferred to another facility. So this story that inspired me to take on sacred listening, really receiving my husband. And it became my first step in anytime I felt upset with Eric or with anyone. All right, so in review, sacred listening is listening with the heart. The skill needed for sacred listening is the skill of receiving. Receiving means welcome what is, be present and accept. And when it rains, let it rain. You practice receiving and therefore sacred listening by starting with yourself, starting simple with small, unimportant situations, and you work your way up to more complex, complicated situations. And so when you've practiced all the easy ones, you'll be more able to notice and call a halt to reactions that don't work and that you never really wanted in the first place. So it gets your reactions out of the way so that you can actually listen to yourself, most importantly, your own inner voice, and to other people. All right, that's today's message. I really hope it helps you. And please do share this episode with anyone that you think might benefit from it. If I can be of assistance to you in any way, you can go to incareofrelationships.com and you can contact me that way. Thank you for listening and for considering this information and for putting it to work for you in any way that can benefit your life and the quality of your life. All right, that's it. Thank you for being here today. I look forward to seeing you again. And in the meantime, take very, very, very good care of yourself.